Hello and welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Tyler, and today we are going to get back into our regularly scheduled off-season programming. A few episodes ago, Eli kind of gave you a run through of the second base situation for the Baltimore Orioles. A lot of that is focused on Jackson Holliday, how he struggled in 2024, how we hope he's going to get better in 2025 and beyond. And now we're going to move to the position next to that on the diamond, and that's going to be first base. I know we're kind of zigzagging around here. We promise to get to all 9 of the positions. Maybe we make it 10 if we want to do starting pitching and bullpen separated. We'll get to all the positions by the time free agency really gets up and running here. After Thanksgiving time, typically, as I record this, the World Series is going into a game 5. It could be over tonight. The offseason starts just a couple days after that, but really things don't get going until past Thanksgiving. Usually the winter meetings are when things really start to get going. So we should have things all wrapped up by the end of November. And then we'll get into, what the Orioles might be doing, rumors, things we wish they would do, etc. So today we're going to talk about the first base situation for the Orioles, how it went in 2024, what it's maybe looking like in 2025. And in my opinion, it's one of the most interesting position groups on the entire roster. So we'll get into that in just a second. Just a couple housekeeping notes. House cleaning. You got to clean your house to keep the house. We are part of the Believe Podcast Network. If you have a sports interest that you have that maybe is not just the Orioles, if you have a football team, a basketball team, go over to Believe.com, BLEAV.com, and search for your favorite team. Believe most likely has a show for you, so check them out there. Second, got to pay some bills by mentioning our sponsor, which has been our sponsor for a couple months now. Very appreciative of Bet Online. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. That's right. It's getting cold out. We got football. We got basketball. Baseball's winding down. And from opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, Bet Online has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all of your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, the last game or so of the MLB playoffs, NHL, and even political props if you're into that. So head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering, and that is BetOnline. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, so first base for the Baltimore Orioles. Heading over to Fangraphs to take a look at how the Orioles as a team performed at first base in 2024. And if you look here, you search by WAR, F-WAR, the Orioles finished 13th in MLB, sandwiched between the Mets and the Royals with 1.7 F-WAR. The top team in the league in baseball was the Philadelphia Phillies with Bryce Harper playing a lot of innings there. Toronto Blue Jays had a good year with Vlad Guerrero bouncing back after being not amazing the last couple of seasons, not even getting out of the gate this year all that well, but then really turning things on later in the year. And then obviously Freddie Freeman led the way for the Dodgers, and we're seeing in the World Series right now what an impact player, Freddie Freeman is, being an NL player his whole career. I feel like Orioles fans, we don't get to see him all that much. He's good, but to actually watch it on display is pretty amazing. The Orioles are not in that tier of first baseman. They are more in the acceptable range of first baseman. Like I said, 1.7 FWAR, 107 WRC plus, which is 7% above league average for a hitter, in general. But at first base, I think you probably want a little bit more than that. If I filter just by WRC plus, you can see the Orioles end up a little bit below average there at 107. The 15th team in the league is 109, which is the Angels. 16th is the Padres at 107. So the Orioles are like average, maybe slightly a touch below, which, is not ideal. It's not a killer at one position. But at first base, I think you really want somebody with some thump in the lineup, and the Orioles don't really have that right now. If you dig into specifically where the production came from for the Baltimore Orioles, obviously we know it's mostly 2 players. It's Ryan Mountcastle and it's Ryan O'Hearn. And Mountcastle got the majority of the playing time at first base because he is the better defender of the two. Obviously some of the numbers on Fangraphs don't necessarily indicate that. I'll say that. But Mountcastle is a finalist for a Gold Glove in the American League. I think the eye test tells you that he is better at first base than Ryan O'Hearn. O'Hearn looks like a statue over there. Mountcastle at least has some range to his game. So I think I would agree in general that I think, and most people would say that Ryan Mountcastle is the better defender of the two at first base. Hitting wise, it ended up being about even in terms of WRC plus. Mountcastle at 108, O'Hearn at 107. The two obviously played pretty well together as a platoon. Mountcastle would sit a lot against right-handed pitching. Not necessarily a lot, I guess. I wouldn't say that. Mountcastle would sit occasionally against a very good right-handed pitcher, and then obviously Mountcastle missed some time on the IL. O'Hearn would play a lot of first base against the better right-handed pitchers, and then O'Hearn would get in the game a lot as a DH. Um, I think though where we're kind of lacking here is going to be in terms of home runs. Mountcastle had 13 over 113 games. O'Hearn 5 over 52 games. So they both almost hit home runs at a very similar rate, like one every, what's that, 9 to 10 games, like a little over 10, once every 10 games for O'Hearn. And then for Mountcastle, it's like one every 9 or so. Like not crazy. It's not, I don't think, again, not ideal, not what you want. And then for Mountcastle, obviously doesn't walk much, strikes out a ton, and you pair that with a, I think, less than ideal home run rate for a first baseman. That's not a perfect package for an everyday first baseman, which is why he's kind of sort of been a platoon role with O'Hearn. Again, Mountcastle does play a lot. O'Hearn plays more sparingly. And it gets protected more often. I would say, when Brandon Hyde's putting his lineups together, he is less weary of Mountcastle against anybody. And O'Hearn, he does try to protect a little bit historically, although some of the data doesn't necessarily back up his decision to do that all the time. I know people have complained about him not playing against lefties too often, them being too conservative with him. And then you see him do hit against lefties and he holds his own well enough. But the reality is that that's what the Orioles decided to do. And I can't say I totally disagree with it, to be honest. Um, O'Hearn this year just wasn't quite the same consistent hitter that he was last year, and that really kind of hurt. Was part of the Orioles' downfall in the second half of the season is that O'Hearn wasn't quite the hitter he was last year. Really provided none of the power that I think we were hoping he maybe would stumble into. 5 home runs in 52 games at first base. Again, this isn't his entire season. If I open up Ryan O'Hearn's entire year, I can't remember how many home runs he hit. 15 in the whole season. Again, he played a lot of DH, a lot of right field, left field, but 15 home runs this year with almost 500 at bats. He had 14 home runs last year in fewer than 400 at bats. So you'd hope you give him 130 more at bats, he would give you, I don't know, another 10 home runs, and it just didn't happen. His slugging percentage dipped from 480 last year to 427. So not ideal there. And then if I click into Ryan Mountcastle's situation, let's see how he did over the entire season. Because again, he would DH occasionally too, but no, all of his home runs, 13, came at first base. His slugging percentage went from 452 last year down to 425, which is almost identical to what it was in 2022 when it really felt like he backslid from 2021 when he was kind of a menace. And obviously the change in the dimensions of Camden Yards, he went from 33 home runs in 21 to 22 in 22. And then this year went down to 13. Again, only played 124 games. So not going to bash him too much for that. I think if he would have played the 140, maybe he would have gotten to 20 home runs. It would have been close. Well, probably not. He probably would have been more like 17 home runs. So in general, yeah, the power production was down for Ryan Mountcastle there. So I don't think that anything I said there is really groundbreaking stuff. We all understand what the Orioles have at first base is average, maybe good, not great. I don't know if I would say good necessarily. It is about average across the board. So then going into 2025, you have to think about what the Orioles have to pay for that. O'Hearn has a team option, a very reasonable team option at $3.5 million. Last year, he signed a 1-year deal with a team option for 2025 at that $3.5 million. Will the Orioles pick that up? I don't know. We can talk about that. And then Mountcastle is eligible for arbitration, which will be his second to last year of arbitration. He'll get arbitration, I believe, this year and then again next year, and then he'll hit free agency ahead of the 2027 season is my understanding. Although let me confirm that rather than saying something that is not true. Yeah, exactly. Free agent 2027. So he'll be a free agent after the 2026 season. So the Orioles have 2 additional years of team control for him. His projected salary for 2025, however, is $6.6 million dollars. So you combine 6.6 million with 3.5, the Orioles will be paying $10.1 million dollars for an average-ish first baseman, and it's taking up 2 roster spots to get that. Yes, O'Hearn can technically play right field. Mountcastle, we've seen him try to play left field in the past. Obviously, that's definitely not going to work nowadays with the dimensions at Camden Yards being what they are. It's not really an option. It's really the two of them are first base DH. If Santander is in here, I guess that makes that a little bit more feasible. But in general, they're first baseman DHs, and you're paying $10.1 million dollars to across two of them to get essentially like 1.5 positions on the roster. It's not ideal. It's not ideal, I don't think. If you look at the free agent situation in the offseason, there are a few names that I think are intriguing. I'll just kind of run down them for the folks that aren't watching on YouTube, which if you're not, you should check us out over on YouTube. We do post these as videos. I know I personally like to do a screen share and kind of work through my thought process here and show folks what I'm looking at. But I know Jesse and Eli don't always do that. But for my episodes in particular, I would recommend going over to YouTube and checking us out. Just search the Warehouse Pod and we'll pop up. But the list of free agent first basemen that MLB.com has picked out are Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, Carlos Santana, Paul Goldschmidt, O'Hearn, although there's the club option. So again, assume he's not on there. Justin Turner, Wilmer Flores, Joey Gallo, Anthony Rizzo, Josh Bell, Rhys Hoskins, Garrett Cooper, Yuli Gurriel, G-Man Choi, and Rowdy Tellez. Now, the lower part of that list, I don't expect the Orioles to really be involved in. Anthony Rizzo has a club option for the Yankees. Will they pick that up? He hasn't been particularly good this year, but I feel like the Yankees are kind of in the win now mode. We got to win. We got to win. And I don't know if they have an obvious solution at first base, but of course they could decline the option and get into this situation the Orioles are in as well. So he's up in the air. Joey Gallo, I would imagine his option's not getting picked up. And then Rhys Hoskins can opt out, but he was not very good this year. So I would not expect Rhys Hoskins to opt out if that's still the situation. So I think more if you're looking at an upgrade, if you want to upgrade the position, which the Orioles are in a position to win games, I would not expect them to try to downgrade at the position. That would make no sense. I think you're looking at Christian Walker, Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso, not so much, I would say, is not really, doesn't feel like a fit for the Orioles, but, maybe. Santana, Goldschmidt, and Turner. Now, Walker, Goldschmidt, Turner, all right-handed hitters. Goldschmidt coming off not a so great season. Santana is a switch hitter. Obviously, Oriole Park nowadays plays very differently to right-handed and left-handed hitters. And when you're switch hitter, you're going to hit left-handed more than you're going to hit right-handed. So that could be advantageous to Santana. And Santana, if I'm remembering correctly, had quite an interesting or quite an intriguing year this past year. I'll pull up his numbers so that I'm not talking out of my backside. But 2.5 B WAR, so this is baseball reference WAR, 238 batting average, 328 on base, 420 slugging for a 109 OPS plus. He hit 23 home runs for the Twins this year. 124 hits, 26 doubles, like I said, 23 home runs, 65 walks, 99 strikeouts. So this is a guy that doesn't strike out a ton. He puts the ball in play. He gets on base at a nice clip, 328 with a 238 batting average is a very good difference between the two numbers. It's going to be a very different approach than what the Orioles have gotten from Mountcastle recently, which Mountcastle last year hit about 30 points higher on his batting average than Santana, but his on-base percentage was 20 points lower. So it's going to be a very different approach. And then I know I've been using WRC plus for a lot of this. And like I said, Mountcastle had a 108 WRC plus. Santana had a 1.6 or 114 WRC plus. So you're getting another bump up there. And then if you look at salaries, last year Santana made $5.25 million with the Twins. Now he was coming off a season with the Brewers and the Pirates, where I think he wasn't quite as good. Let's see. 101 OPS plus last year, down from 109 this year. So a slightly worse season, but not dramatically. So, and again, offense was down across the league this year. So his numbers relative to league average would be better this year, even if he hit exactly the same. So his production really didn't change all that much. He had identical number of home runs. His uh, batting average was 2 points higher or 2 points lower this year. On base percentage 10 points higher. Slugging percentage 9 points lower. So Santana really gave you the same kind of a season, but because the league was worse this year, Santana's production was viewed in a better light. So would he make $5 million again next year? Maybe not. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe 7 million, 8 million. Still, that is less than what O'Hearn and Mountcastle together would would be worth. Now, defensively, is he as good as Ryan Mountcastle? Well, I think it can be helpful to look at Baseball Savant for that. So I've got Ryan O'Hearn's numbers and Ryan Mountcastle's numbers here in just a second, and they can sometimes take a little bit to load. Savant is a notoriously slow one to load for me. Um, and like right now, I just clicked on a picture of Anthony Santander, but it said Carlos Santana, and I'm getting to Carlos Santana. So fielding wise, I think that really what you care about at first base is going to be range. You're getting to those ground balls. Yes, picking the ball is important too. I don't have numbers on that, but in terms of range, he ranked in the 97th percentile of outs above average with 14 runs saved, or outs above average rather. O'Hearn doesn't qualify, but I think we can imagine those numbers would be pretty putrid. Mountcastle is the interesting one. His range outs above average was 2 outs above average, and his arm strength. Mountcastle's got a very bad arm. I think that's been a thing about him since he was a prospect. He does not have a strong arm, and he's at first base, so you don't really think about it very much. But outs above average, only 2, which is in the 70th percentile. That kind of indicates he's a good fielder. But Carlos Santana, a much better fielder. So you start to stack a couple of these things. Switch hitter, I think the Orioles would prefer over for right-handed only. The offensive numbers, the actual production is better. Now, if you look at peripheral numbers, exit velocities, things like that, Mountcastle hits the ball harder. So does O'Hearn. There is some more red on their pages. And O'Hearn has the benefit of he doesn't really strike out. He doesn't really swing and miss. He doesn't really chase. Whereas Mountcastle is kind of the opposite. Mountcastle and O'Hearn are very opposite kinds of hitters. Mountcastle hits the ball harder, but he whiffs a lot. He strikes out a lot. He does not walk. So I think what I'm kind of saying here is Santana can be an obvious target for the Orioles this year, because he kind of marries those two things together really well, where he doesn't have the hardest hit rates, but they are passable. And he pairs that with really good defense. And then at the plate, he doesn't strike out and he does walk. And he's just very patient. And again, I've talked about in some of these recent episodes, or maybe just the last couple, needing sort of that veteran presence in the dugout of a guy that's been there, done that. Carlos Santana is as, been there, done that of a guy as possible. Was really good with Cleveland for a long time. I believe he went to a World Series with them, did not win it, but has been an All-Stars, won a Silver Slugger. He's been, a down ballot MVP guy. He's 38, going to be 39, age 39 season next year. I think this is a guy you're getting who maybe is a little bit hungry to kind of get something he hasn't had before. And I would be really intrigued if the Orioles go after Carlos Santana. Now, that would mean you're trading Ryan Mountcastle in all likelihood. I think you could theoretically pick up the Ryan O'Hearn option for 3.5 because that's really not a horrible number. I think you can tell yourself he can play first base occasionally, give Santana a breather. He can DH. He can play right field somewhat. Let me look at Ryan O'Hearn's numbers against lefties this year, because I'm telling myself a lie about him being passable against them this year, but I do feel like he was a bit better this year against southpaws than he had historically been. But if that is the case, then I think you can even say that that's an avenue as well. So he's not been great against them. So his line against lefties this year, he only had 44 plate appearances, so it's a pretty small sample size. 262 batting average, which is only 2 points lower than against righties, but a 296 on base, a 310 slugging, a 605 OPS. So has not hit home runs against them, has just 2 doubles in 11 hits, 2 doubles, no triples, no home runs, 4 RBI, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. So doesn't walk as much, doesn't get on base, doesn't hit home runs. So I don't think you would still want Ryan O'Hearn in there against good lefties, but I think he is viable against them in a pinch. So I don't think you can discredit that too much. And I think if you're talking about keeping one or the other, O'Hearn's just so much cheaper and I think worth less in a trade anyway, that you could keep O'Hearn for 3.5 million, bring in a veteran to be more the everyday first baseman. O'Hearn can spell him. You can put O'Hearn in places to succeed, which I think is where O'Hearn really thrives, is when you can put him in here and there, pinch hit. I would be interested to know what his pinch hitting um, numbers are this year as well. I know I'm kind of just going off the cuff with this stuff now. That's sort of how my brain works, is I just sort of think of a thing and then want to dig into it a little bit more. I don't see pinch hit numbers here for O'Hearn, but I think that's where O'Hearn really thrives, is more like coming into situations where he can take advantage of the platoon advantage and put the Orioles in a place to succeed as well. I think that's an interesting one. Going back to the free agent list, Christian Walker is, I think if you want to get a guy to come in and replace those two, Walker feels like the one to do it because, yes, he's right-handed, which is not advantageous at Camden Yards anymore, but has kind of continuously put up really good numbers for the Diamondbacks, sort of quietly over there in the NL West. The games are late. The Diamondbacks are not one of the more popular teams in that division with the Dodgers and the Giants and the Padres. The Diamondbacks kind of sit there maybe just above the Rockies in terms of popularity. But look at his numbers last 3 years. In 2022, 125 OPS plus. In 2023, 122 OPS plus. In 2024, 121 OPS plus. Now, again, the league got worse this year, and Walker actually saw his OPS plus go down a little bit, so he got worse as well. But still, 36 home runs in 22, 33 home runs in 23, 26 home runs in 24. He plays a nice defense, has two gold gloves. Like, if you're looking for a guy to just out and out replace O'Hearn and Mountcastle, he's the guy. Now, the only thing is, he made $10.9 million last year. He's 32 years old. Next year will be his age 33 season. We know how Elias feels about giving older guys big contracts. I think if you're Walker, you're probably going in looking for, a 3-year deal. Give me 3 years, 15 mil a year. That doesn't seem outlandish. That's $45 million. I think he's right to ask for it. Will the Orioles give him that? Doesn't feel likely. Does not feel likely. I could see almost the Yankees going and getting Walker before the Orioles would. If they're like, their first base situation this year was kind of a disaster. The Yankees need a first baseman. Walker is the best one on the free agent market, which is easy enough to go and get. Plus, he might come with draft pick compensation. We don't know that piece of it yet. That's a whole element here. Will Santana come with that? I doubt it, because the Twins aren't going to want to give him $18 million or whatever the qualifying offer is this year. So I think the Diamondbacks would give Walker that for a year. I wouldn't think that um the Twins would give Santana that. So I don't expect that there. I think the other name to look at is Paul Goldschmidt on the free agent market. He was not good this past year. 245 batting average, 302 on base, 414 slug. Went from a 177 OPS plus in 22 when he won the NL MVP, down to 120 OPS plus last year, and then a 98 OPS plus this past year. So he was a worse than average hitter. He was a worse hitter than O'Hearn, a worse hitter than Mountcastle, and he's not getting those gold gloves anymore. He's now rated as a negative defender by a lot of metrics. What I love about Goldschmidt is he's an older guy, sort of a been there, done that. Not the playoff success necessarily. So there's some of that hunger there. But are you just getting this guy too late where he can be useful for your team? It sort of feels like it. And I don't see the Orioles with their World Series aspirations, you know, giving a everyday position to a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, who maybe has his best days behind him. But I think those are kind of the big free agent options. Obviously, there's internal solutions as well. So let's talk about that for a minute. Um, Over on Fangraphs, you can go to their roster resource page, and it kind of gives you a nice rundown of the entire organization. And the names I'm looking at as potential first basemen would be Heston Kjerstad, who played there a little bit in the minors. Kobe Mayo, same situation. If they bring Emmanuel Rivera back, he can plug in a little bit. Was pretty good for the Orioles late last year. They didn't use him in the playoffs at all, which I found kind of kind of interesting how bad the team had been offensively, and he'd been one bright spot. I figured give him some at bats. They didn't choose to do that in the two games against the Royals. Um, and I think that's kind of where those conversations stop as far as internal solutions early on next year. Obviously, a lot of things can happen May, June, July, August, September. But if you're talking out of the gate last year or next year, if they don't sign a free agent, they don't bring O'Hearn back, they trade Mountcastle, I think you're really only kind of looking at Kerstad, Mayo, Rivera. And I think as I say that to you right now, as you're thinking about it, that feels like a completely illogical, improbable solution to this situation. The Orioles have never, in the Michael Elias era, as far as I can recall, just let young guys take a starting role with no pushback. They sort of did that with Holiday early this season, where they had Tony Kemp. They played him for a little bit. Then Holiday was rocking it in AAA. They said, Kemp, thanks for your 2 weeks. Get out of here. We're going to give Holiday the job. He came up, really struggled. They sent him right back down, and they made him work his way back up. And I don't even know that he would have come back up and been the everyday second baseman if Mateo hadn't gotten hurt, if Westberg doesn't get hurt, if Urias doesn't get hurt down the stretch. Like a lot of people had to get hurt for the Orioles to say, all right, like literally our only option is Holiday, and at least he gives us speed and defense, even though the bat right now just isn't happening. The Orioles are not gonna. I don't think the Orioles are gonna say, Heston Kjerstad, we've played you like once every 5 days for these last 2 seasons. Now you're everyday first baseman. I don't see that happening. I think the Orioles either um, return the duo of Mountcastle and O'Hearn for 10 million bucks. They trade or get rid of one of them and let a young guy cycle in with that person. So I think I could see a scenario where they um, trade O'Hearn, get rid of O'Hearn, and let Kjerstad be kind of the left-handed side of a platoon with Mountcastle, or they kind of cut bait on both of them, both Mountcastle and O'Hearn, get a free agent like a Santana who probably gets a one, maybe a 1 year with an option type deal to come in, sort of be that stopgap and make Kjerstad, make Mayo, make whomever force their way into that first base role. Because if you get to June and Westberg's crushing it at third base, uh, I'm thinking about a scenario for Kobe Mayo specifically. Say Westberg's crushing at third base, there's no room there. Say that in right field, you brought Santander back and he's your right fielder. You're not going to move him. Mullins is, a gold glove type center fielder. Kowser's looking great in left field. Like there's nowhere to shuffle the deck chairs around except for first base where you have a veteran on an expiring contract who is doing fine. Santana, maybe he's more like a one, maybe he's a Mountcastle type where he's hitting 108 WRC plus, like fine, but there's room for improvement. If we can get a guy in here hitting 125 WRC plus, we take it. You force Kjerstad to like force his way in there. Same thing with Mayo. I'm sorry, I said Mayo and then I flipped to Kjerstad, but it works both ways, right? Because they both kind of have similar position situations where there's a lot of doubts about Mayo playing third base, so it becomes corner outfield or first base, and Kjerstad obviously is a corner outfielder or a first base DH, and they're sort of competing for similar innings there. I don't expect the Orioles to hand any young guys a position, even in right field. Where not this is the right field episode, but Kjerstad maybe goes into spring training as the favorite in right field. I would fully expect the Orioles to go sign some veteran corner outfielder for maybe even a cheap deal, but somebody who's there in the spring to really push Kjerstad for that right field job. I don't expect them to just give anybody the job. And the same applies to first base. The only caveat there is if, you sign a veteran there that can do the job, you hand them the job for April and say, hey, we're giving you the money and you got to work your tail off to beat these talented young guys we got. Um, so what I will say to kind of wrap all that in a bow is that the Orioles' first base situation in 2024 was fine. It was not, however, an area of the lineup that they could depend on for power. They were depending on their shortstop. They were depending on their right fielder. And they were depending on other areas of the field that unfortunately had issues. Westberg had been really good, got hurt. Not the same power from Urias, even though Urias was competent. Obviously, was quite good, honestly, when Westbrook was out, but not the power type of player. The Orioles have historically or recently relied on their catcher to be an above average hitter. That was the case up until the All-Star break, and then it really was not in the second half. And then even though they had relatively healthy seasons at first base, I know Mountcastle had the IL stint, but Ahern was healthy. Mountcastle didn't miss a ton of time. Um, they could never depend on first base to be that 30 to 40 home run type of position that I think they need it to be. Um, moving forward. I know I've called out Santana, who is not a 30 home run guy. He is a 20 home run guy. But I think if you pair him and then again let an O'Hearn, let a Kerstad, let a whomever kind of come in and pick their spots where they can really excel, I think maybe you make the position into a 30 home run type of role pretty easily because that's just what they need. It's great that Mountcastle plays decent defense, and I personally love his personality. Mountcastle is one of like the most jovial guys on the team. I think him and Cowser are right up there next to one another in terms of like likability guys on the whole roster. But if this team is gonna take those steps forward to uh to win a World Series, then I think you you have to make some tough decisions. And first base feels like the first logical one where you can say, we have an acceptable solution in house, but what do we need to do to take this team to the next level? And what is doable? What is realistic? And I think you can easily say, okay, O'Hearn's on a $3.5 million deal. He can probably get a contract somewhere else. Um, but we need more than that for $3.5 million. We'll cut bait there. And then Mountcastle, I think in the right environment that has a better right field or better left field situation for him, he can go and hit 30, 35 home runs and play decent defense and get his money somewhere. And we can get back an impact arm in the bullpen that we have control of for a couple of years, or a number 4 or 5 starter that we have control of for 2 years. Like I think you can make that deal and feel pretty good about it, knowing that you can get a solution that is going to be as good or better at first base for, yes, probably more salary, but in terms of roster flexibility, replacing 2 guys for 1, I think it's better. And then overall production, I think a guy like a Carlos Santana is going to be better than what the Orioles had in 2024. And I know I want to talk about the roster flexibility one more time because I've mentioned, Mountcastle and O'Hearn being those 2 guys playing one position, and I've kind of talked about Santana plus the other young guys filling in. That's a little bit more complicated, but I still view that as Santana or somebody similar would be the first baseman, and you're going to get days off. You're going to have matchups you maybe don't like. That's where those other guys fill in, and they also have positional flexibility. I think Kerstad could still play right field a little bit. Mayo can play third base a little bit. He can play right field a little bit. There's positional flexibility there that I think O'Hearn and Mountcastle certainly doesn't have it, and O'Hearn technically has it. He's got it on his resume, but it's pretty rough. It is pretty rough. That is not one of his skill sets is defense or glove work, or especially not in right field. It is rough. So that's what my hope would be, is they seek some upgrades at first base and take the assets they do have and turn them into um, other parts of the roster that can really help them. And we've seen depth in the pitching department is super crucial. So we'll see. But that's kind of the lay of the land, the state of the race for the 2024 Baltimore Orioles and their first base situation going into 2025. If you're listening to this and you have different opinions, please let us know. Like I said, on YouTube, you can leave a comment. Tell me how dumb I am. Give me your recommendation. You can reach out to us on Twitter, reply to us on there at the Warehouse Pod and tell us what you would do at first base. You can also email the warehousepod@gmail.com. Send us an email and give us your full thoughts on everything, and we'll read it on the show. If it's good and it's not full of vulgarities, we'll read it on the show and give you some feedback there. But that's all I wanted to talk about for this episode. Like I said, we're going to move around the diamond. We've now done second base and first base. I think Eli's going to be next on the feed. I don't know which position he's doing, but I'm sure it'll be a good one. So if you want to hear that, please subscribe to the podcast. We're available on Spotify, Apple, anywhere else you get your podcasts. Subscribe to us there. Please tell your friends about us. Get them involved. The winter is coming up. There's going to be a lot of content about different things. We're not just going to talk about on-field stuff, which can get a little dry sometimes. I think over a long season, even I'm guilty of kind of. There's weeks, like I've said before, there's weeks, especially when the Orioles are on the West Coast, that I feel like I don't see the Orioles because I'm falling asleep or I got other things happening in the summer. But in the winter, there's so much exciting stuff to talk about with player movement, especially for the Orioles, who should be really good again in 2025. I fully expect them to make some changes and be a really good 90 to 100 win team again. And that means this winter is crucial, new ownership, all that jazz. So please get involved with the show and tell folks about us and subscribe to us and give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up or whatever the positive rating is that you can on your particular platform. We'd really appreciate it. It helps all these algorithms, get us in front of other people. So whatever you can do to support us, if you appreciate what we're doing, we would appreciate you for doing that. But that is all I've got for this episode. So I really want to thank you all for listening. I think go Dodgers for the end of the World Series. I'm on the Dodgers side. I don't know. Tell me again what you think there. And yeah, we'll be back in your feed soon with another positional review. So thanks again. My name is Tyler, and this has been the Warehouse Podcast. See ya.